Hey there, so I am Jennibeth Haskins. If you don't know me, I've been doing embroidery for over 10 years now, and I am sharing some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So today we're going to be discussing what is stabilizer, why you need it, and two main types of stabilizer that I use. So what is stabilizer? So this shirt I've got in my hoop, and basically you can see the stabilizer underneath here is where it goes. It goes underneath the item, and it helps to support the stitches as the machine is stitching on your design. If you don't use stabilizer, you are going to experience puckering, and your stitches may not be they may be loose, they may not be tight. So stabilizer is essential for embroidery. So there are actually several different types of stabilizer that you can use, but in today's video, I'm only talking about Tearaway and Cutaway because those are the two types that I use 90% of the time and will get you started with embroidery if you're new. However, if you want to know the other three types of stabilizer that I use sometimes, then you can click the link below and it will take you to the blog post, and I have a printable that explains what the other three types are for. They are sticky stabilizer, poly mesh, and water solving. Okay. So first, let's talk about Cutaway. Cutaway is what I use the most. I love Cutaway because I feel like it supports my stitches and my designs the best. However, it does depend on what you are embroidering on. So for me and my business, I do a lot of t-shirts, which is what I have here. I have this in the hoop. It's ready to be stitched. So Cutaway is very stable and it helps my stitches to be fully supported. When do I use Cutaway? So I just showed you an example. I've got a t-shirt hoop and I've got Cutaway behind it because I feel like that is what I have found that works best for my stitches. Here is the finished t-shirt that I've used Cutaway on. You can see that there's no puckering. It looks great, especially because we have, this design right here has fabric, but then these little pumpkins are just stitched, and that's typically the designs that you're going to find that you might get puckering on, are the little designs that are only stitching, but there's no puckering here. So this is another t-shirt just to show you an example of what it looks like on the back of the shirt after you trim it. So let's talk about trimming it anyways. So after it's finished and you've inspected your design and it looks great, you will just cut away with scissors around your design. Okay? That's partly why it's called Cutaway, because you cut it away. Now, if you do not use thicker t-shirts, let's say you use cheaper t-shirts that are real thin, or maybe you're even using like or embroidering on a little polo that's like that. We call them golf shirts, but they're that really athletic, thin, kind of flimsy material. You may not want to use this type of cutaway. You might want to use the mesh cutaway. For the most part, I like nice knits that are a little bit thicker, so I like to use this cutaway. Another example of when you would use cutaway is on a sweatshirt. This one's a monogram sweatshirt, and you can see on the back, here's the cutaway, and I've trimmed around it after the design was done. You can see how well it supports the stitches. They look great. So most things that you use cutaway on are what you wear. Okay? That doesn't mean that you can't use them on a bag. So I want to show you an example of a bag that you could, depending on what machine you have and depending on how you hoop it or how you put it on the machine, if you float it or whatnot, you could use cutaway on this bag. Okay, and here's why. This bag is big enough that you could inside it out to trim the cutaway, to cut it away. That's not gonna, just because you use cutaway on this doesn't mean that your design is gonna look different, because I recommend Tearaway. Because most people are going to recommend Tearaway for bags, but I wanted to show you that if you can get to it and cut it away, it's okay. Okay, so let's talk about what type of cutaway I use. So you can buy cutaway in a couple different types. You can buy it on a roll, and then it also comes in different weights. I highly recommend a medium weight cutaway, anywhere from 2.0 to 2.5 ounces. And I'll tell you why. When I first started out with embroidery, I was told to use a cutaway that was real thin. And my designs didn't look right. They didn't meet my expectations. I wanted my designs to look almost flawless. I know nothing's perfect, but I wanted them to look very close, and they didn't. So I kept experimenting with different types of stabilizers and cutaways, and I found that a thicker cutaway was much better than the thin that I was using. So that leads me to these pre-cut squares. So I love these pre-cut squares. This is also what I found when I was digging deep to find what type I liked as far as cutaway went. I love these. These save me so much time. I do not like to cut, roll out my cutaway every time and cut around that fits my hoop. That's why I love these pre-cut squares. I can just grab one, put it down, hoop my shirt, and I'm ready to go. So I buy I think this is the either 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 size. I'll link these below. And then the 8 by 8. So these work for my 4 by 4 hoops and my 6 by 6 hoops. And then this works for my 7 by 5 and 9 by 9 hoop that I use. Highly recommend these. Okay, so now let's talk about Tearaway. Tearaway is great too. I use Tearaway not as much as Cutaway because of the things that I monogram on, but Tearaway definitely is used. Okay, so let's talk about when do you use Tearaway. So I want to explain to you, let's take this bib for instance. This bib has a front side and a back side, okay? And then this shirt, it's inside and out, so this is the back side. Okay, the difference between these two is that the back side here is covered up. The back side here is exposed. So anytime that the back side of something, or I should say most of the time, you're going to use Tearaway because you want to be able to tear that Tearaway almost completely away so that you only see your stitches on the back instead of seeing this. You wouldn't want to see this on the back of a bib or a towel or a burnt cloth or something like that. Okay, so number one reason you use Tearaway, because you can see the back and you want to be able to tear it away. I've actually left a little bit of this on here, so I'm going to go ahead and show you. On this particular bib, you can just tear away carefully the Tearaway. So I've already torn away most of it, but you can see I've got a little bit left that I can just tear away, kind of hold your stitches. That's how that works. And so that's how you get rid of Tearaway. You don't cut it away, you tear it away. I know, the names pretty much explain it. Okay, so you also use Tearaway when you're working with bags. Bags, you could use Cutaway because why? The back side is technically not exposed, but this would be really hard to get in here and cut away the cutaway once I was finished stitching it. So I like to use Tearaway so that I can just rip in here and tear it away, and it's very fast. So also for this bag, I use Tearaway. You could use Cutaway if you wanted to because you can get in here and cut it away. But for the most part, I like to use Tearaway on my bags just because it's easy. Okay, so you use Tearaway on bags, any kind of item like a towel, bib, burnt cloth, where the back side of the design is going to be exposed. Let's talk about a situation where you might want to use both Cutaway and Tearaway. So hang with me. So this backpack, I actually use both. I do a lot of these backpacks. They're some of my favorite things to do. So I actually used Cutaway on the top part of this design. I actually hoop this as well. A lot of people wouldn't hoop this. They would put it on a different hoop. But I used Cutaway here so that I have room to cut it away once I'm finished. However, on the pocket down here where I put the name, I used Tearaway because it would be really hard for me to get in here and cut away. So I used Tearaway and I just tore it away. What kind of Tearaway do I buy? Again, I recommend the squares. You can buy the roll if you want to, but I highly recommend the squares. You'll see that I only have this size in the squares. I need to invest in the bigger ones, but I hardly ever use the bigger Tearaways because most of the times the designs that I do using this stabilizer are smaller. Every once in a while I do have a bigger design, so I should probably invest in the squares, in the bigger squares. But again, I like a medium weight Tearaway. You're going to find that this is like 2.2 ounce, I think that I link, and it's a little bit more flimsy than the Cutaway. If you find yourself in a situation where you're embroidering on something thin, like a thinner bag, you might want to use 2 pieces of Tearaway. Of course, where do I get this? Mostly I buy my cutaways from Amazon now. Okay, so let's talk about what if you use the wrong one. It's honestly not that big of a deal. I've used Tearaway on a t-shirt before when I was experimenting just to see how it turned out. The t-shirt wasn't awful, it wasn't a total fail, but it just didn't look as good as when you use Cutaway. So if you accidentally slip up and use the wrong one, it's okay. If you slipped up and used Cutaway on here and you had to get in here to cut it away, not a big deal. You just make it work. Same thing on here. I have used Cutaway on a towel before that was really, I felt like it needed extra support. And it was one of those that the towel was going to be hanging up, so the backside necessarily wasn't going to be exposed all the time because it was more of a decorative piece. And I have used Cutaway on stuff like that before. It's not the end of the world if you accidentally use the wrong one. Don't fret over that. It's probably going to turn out just fine. But because you want your designs to look the best, I highly recommend using Cutaway for those items that are recommended for that, and Tearaway for those items. And I think that's about it. So again, I mentioned the other 3 types of stabilizers that I use the most down below in a little printable. It's a cute little printable that you can print out and be able to access, hey, well, what did she say about Cutaway? What did she say about Tearaway? You can print it out, put it in your sewing room, or maybe in your notebook that you've got notes in, so you know. Especially if you're new to embroidery, it's hard to remember every little thing. It becomes so natural to me because I've been doing it for years and have found the practices that work the best and get the best results for my shirts and sweatshirts and bags and different things that I do. And of course, if I have not mentioned something that you embroider on, send me a message or drop a comment below because I would love to help you figure out what type of stabilizer is best for that as well. Until next time, thank you for watching and stay tuned for your next tip.